Okay, starting with number 1, remember that whenever you see that parallel symbol right here, if two lines are given as parallel, that will almost always, if not always, lead to alternate interior angles being congruent. So parallel means you're going to say alternate interior angles on the reasons side very, very shortly. So this is what the picture looks like. I'll even start drawing it over again. I'll do it this one time so you understand it. That line is parallel to that line. If that's true, then you have a transversal that comes through here, making that angle and that angle alternate interior. And then you have another transversal. I'll move it over so it lines right up. So that's alternate interior with that. So you really have two pair of alternate interior angles just because you knew the lines were parallel. Okay? So you put the givens down. One of the givens had nothing to do with that. One was just TQ is congruent to SQ right here. And that actually gives me a congruent side. So there's one piece right there. But this parallel part here, parallel will always lead to two angles being congruent because alternate interior angles are formed. So up here, we already drew it, but angle T and angle S are congruent. And also P and R are congruent. So T and S and P and R. So angle T and angle S are congruent. Angle P and angle R are congruent. And the reason is parallel lines form alternate interior angles. And there are two more congruences, an angle and an angle. It told me that TQ was congruent to SQ. So what do I have here? Angle, angle, side. Number 2. Very, very similar. This time it tells me two pieces of information. One, PT is parallel to SR, and then PT is also congruent to SR or RS, which would be the same piece. So the parallel part means that that and that are parallel. It also has a marked congruent. That's something separate, but they are congruent. This transversal gives me those alternate interior angles, and this transversal gives me those alternate interior angles. This time I have boom, 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 but we're not even there yet. So we have one congruence already in the given, a pair of sides, and then because the lines were parallel, angle P and angle R are congruent, and angle T and angle S are congruent because parallel lines form congruent alternate interior angles. And there are my two other congruences right there. Angle, angle, which means triangle PQT and triangle RQS are congruent because of angle, side, angle. Okay, number 3. Two pieces of given information. Again, parallelism. CB is parallel to ED, which means I'm going to have alternate interior angles somewhere. And then also, A is the midpoint of CD. No congruences, but this is going to lead to one. So CB is parallel to ED. And it's already marked with arrows, but that's parallel to that, which means I have a transversal, alternate interior there, and another transversal this way, alternate interior there. And then it said that A was the midpoint of CD, meaning that these two sections are congruent. So let's go to the proof. I have my givens taken care of. First I'll deal with the parallel. That's going to lead to alternate interior angles. So I know that angle C and angle D are congruent, and I know that angle E and angle B are congruent because parallel lines form congruent alternate interior angles. And because of the midpoint, I can say that CA and DA are congruent because a midpoint divides a segment into two congruent segments. There are my three congruences. 1, 2, 3. I had an angle, I had an angle, and I have a side. But what order? Let's check it out. Angle, angle, side. It happened to be in that order, angle, angle, side, but you always have to check your picture for that. So angle, angle, side is your reason for the proof statement at the end. Number 4. Got a whole bunch of stuff given here. We have 2 pair of parallel lines because we don't have the bow tie situation this time. If you notice, it's like 2 triangles side by side, so they have to tell you that both are parallel, because if this one is parallel to this one, and I had that angle is now going to be the same as this angle. That's a little bit different. Those are an alternate interior this time because it's not a bow tie. So those, if you remember, I'm going to take this off the picture and see if you recognize it. That would actually be corresponding angles. So angle A and angle DCE are corresponding angles, but they're going to be congruent. And then if B, C, and DE are parallel, then I have another pair with the same transversal. I have another pair of corresponding angles. And then it also says that C is the midpoint of AE. So I'm going to say that this angle and this angle are congruent. You could number them, but I'm going to say angle A, because there's no intersection there, is congruent to angle DCE. I'm also going to say that this angle is the same as that angle, which is going to be angle BCA and angle DEC, because this time parallel lines form corresponding angles. Now both alternate interior and corresponding are going to be congruent. Instead of saying alternate interior this time, you say corresponding because it's like this rather than that. That gives me 2 angles that are congruent. And C being the midpoint, that means that AC and CE, or I'll say EC, are congruent, because a midpoint divides a segment into 2 congruent segments. And that is my third congruency. Let's see what the actual order is here. I have an angle, side, angle. So the prove line is up here. Triangle ABC is now officially congruent to triangle CDE because angle, side angle, angle, side angle. A little bit trickier there, but if you pause the video, go back, understand that parallel lines always lead to congruent angles. Always alternate interior if you have the bow tie, and this was the first time we saw corresponding, but parallel always leads to alternate interior or corresponding. Congruent either way, and there's always one more piece you'll have.